Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Dr. B Show. I'm here with Nic, the lawyer, Nic McGrue. He's an awesome human being. I met him at the RPM conference back in April. We discussed everything from accredited investor to non-accredited investor to everything in between. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Dr. B Show. I'm your host, Dr. B. I'm sitting here with the great Nic McGrue. Nic, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Even better now that I'm in your presence.
That's right. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it, man. Thanks. So let's jump right into it, man. So tell everyone about yourself.
All right. So my name is Nic McGrue. I am a securities attorney. The law firm is Polymath Legal. At Polymath Legal, we help real estate investors lawfully raise capital so they can generate passive income while creating generational wealth. So that's a long way of saying I help you raise the capital for your deals, but make sure that you stay out of trouble while you're doing it.
That's true. Stay out of trouble, stay out of jail, right? As they say. I love it. I love it. All right. So, I'm a big education guy. I mean, you see the belts here, but there are degrees there, right here and there. So, so you went to the University of Washington, where you got your bachelor's of American Ethnic Studies, Master's of Law from Thomas Jefferson School of Law, and of course your JD from Pepperdine Law. So how did each of these experiences help you in what you're doing today?
It's we are the sum of all of our experiences. And so I'm going to kind of do a slight detour. People often say, is there anything you regretted or anything like that? I'm like, no, things did not go how I would have pictured them out, but I am happy where I'm at. So it's all great. So as to how those kind of helped me to get here, I'd say at UW, that's where I had kind of had the seed of practicing law planted in my head a little bit before that. But when I got there, I got an email that said, hey, would you like to be on this, email list for people that might be interested in law school? And I was like, sure, it doesn't help to get a couple emails, no big deal. So I went to a couple of those meetings and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is interesting. And so when I really got the seed in there where I was like, this seed's going to grow, I took a course called Introduction to Business Law. And so it's kind of just your intro business law course, and talked about the basics of law as well as contracts and things like that. And I was like, this stuff just really clicks with me. And kind of knowing myself better now, I think it's just because I like rules, I like logic, I like order, and law is all about that. So there's rules, there's logic, there's order to it. And so I was like, yeah, this just makes sense. And so that was my sophomore year at UW. And so from there I said, yeah, I think I'm going to make law school a thing. And so fast forward, when it came time to apply for law schools, I'm from Washington State originally. All my family is there still. And so I was first like, I'm going to get away. I'm young. I'm going to be free, go out on my own. And so I really loved Washington, D.C. and had applied to a couple schools there, a couple schools in other places in the country, but also a few along the West Coast as well. I tell this story all the time. Out of maybe 12 schools, UW was my number one school, my alma mater. And of all the 12 schools I got into, all of them except for one, and I bet you can guess which one it was, did not get into UW. And so at that point, I was like, okay, so I can't be in Washington now, so I really am going to have to go away. So when I was starting looking heavily at Washington, D.C., I was just like, that's a little bit far. It's a different time zone. It's like a 5-hour flight. Versus, California, same time zone, 2 hours up the coast, a quick weekend trip. And so that's kind of what made me start thinking a little bit closer to home. And then when I went to Pepperdine, I visited it and just really had a feeling of just family. A lot of other schools I went to, it felt kind of competitive, or the people were being performatively nice, but not really caring. But there I was like, they seem like they genuinely care here. And thankfully, that is the experience that I had there, is that there was a lot of genuine care there. So it was a great experience at Pepperdine, but I graduated at a time that was tough, 2009. Not a great time to be out as a new lawyer because the economy was crashing. And so I was competing for jobs with people that had been lawyers for 2 or 3 years, so they had all gotten laid off. And so when I graduated and was applying for these jobs, mind you, by the way, I actually had a job lined up, but the economy ended up taking that company down. So when I graduated, I'm applying for jobs. These are jobs that I didn't really want, and I'm getting passed over left and right. And in the back of my mind, I knew at some point I always wanted to have my own firm. And so I'm applying for these jobs, not really wanting them. A year goes by, I had done kind of contract project work here and there. And I finally said, you know what, I'm waiting for this to get this job that I don't really want so that a couple of years from now I can start my law firm. And I said, you know what? Why don't I just pull the trigger and go for it? Because all that time I had been still business planning, working on a website, all that sort of stuff. So when I started the law firm, one of my first clients was a family-owned real estate company, and they had a whole lot of tax issues. I knew the real estate law pretty well and had mentors and all the guidance and everything. But in law, a lot of times the answer is the one that can be the best supported. But tax is one area where we have a lot of clear right and wrong answers. And so all those tax issues the client had, I would always refer it out because I said, I don't know this stuff well enough and I don't want to take on stuff I don't know. And so, but I saw how much money I was sending out the door. And so I said, let me kind of figure out how to learn this stuff. And so that's how I ended up getting my LLM in taxation. So normally law school, you just get a general law degree. But I went back to get the LLM, and that's where you specify or specialize in a specific area. So I got an LLM in taxation and financial services. I don't really do the tax side too much anymore, but kind of working in the financial services general sphere. Yeah,
exactly. That makes sense. Which segues into my next question. You're obviously a tenured professor at El Camino College. Shout out to them. But tell us about your story. I guess you already started a little bit. Can you expand on that about how you started Polymath Legal PC? I think you already just elaborated. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So what I'll say to any entrepreneur out there, it's hard. It's hard. TV shows try to make it seem like the hustle's fun.
Glitz and glamour, right? Nice cars.
But they don't show the sleepless nights. They don't show you sitting at a desk for 12 hours. They don't show that you looking at your bank account and not knowing that you've worked a whole ton, but haven't gotten a whole lot. So that's the one thing I'll say is that it is tough. But if you can keep pushing and keep going, it's worth it. So we'll take it back. I graduated in 2009. I was supposed to have a job lined up when I graduated. I had it. And then in the winter before graduation, they said, yeah, our company's reorganizing. Our office is shutting down. So sorry, we don't have a job for you anymore. And some of us might not have a job. And so I couldn't feel bad for me because they had actual jobs they were losing. So in the meantime, like I said, I was applying for jobs that I didn't really want because I said, I got to work at a firm, got to get some experience. But I knew that I wanted to work more in the business world of law versus litigation. And most of legal education is geared towards litigation. So anyway, I'm applying for these places. In the meantime, I'm working on my website, the business plan, everything in the background. I had one good friend where she did some tax consulting, like a different area of tax. Her company did tax consulting. And she was a law school friend. And so she said, hey, we can train you. It won't be full time, but like when we need extra help on projects, you can come. And so I was like, great. Because again, I didn't have a job. So working those projects, I might work like a week or two and then not have another project for like another month or two. But I was doing that. That's one thing that kind of helped keep the lights on and keep me fed. And I remember I had one project with that company. Most of them were based in LA because that's where I'm based at and was at the time. But I had one where the friend calls me. It's like on a Friday or Thursday or something. She's like, hey, what are you doing next week? And I'm like, not even thinking work-wise. I'm like, oh, I'm pretty open. What, do you want to get happy hour or something? And she's like, no, I'm in New York. I was like, oh, I guess no happy hour then. She's like, well, maybe you want to come here and work. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I've been at a project in New York for 2 weeks. We need some more help. So if you can come out for the week, we'll fly you out, we'll put you up, and we'll pay you, obviously. And so I was like, great, cool. So I went out there planning to be there a week. We didn't finish that week. So I ended up staying 2 weeks straight. We didn't finish after 2 weeks. So then I was at the point where I'm like, okay, I only brought like a week and a half's worth of clothes. So I need to go back home and bills to pay. Hadn't planned to be gone that long. So I fly back on like a Friday and then fly right back on Sunday. So I ended up being in New York for about a month working on that project. And it was great. It was fun. And, I was younger and being in New York and having an expense account and all that was awesome. But I saw how much that the company was making versus how much I was getting paid. And I got paid decently. I was not upset about what I got paid, but I was like, me and two other people did all the work here and we got a little bit and they got a whole bunch. And so that's what really motivated me to say, you know what, even if I'm, not going to get my pie is not going to be as big as theirs because I'm brand new, but I think that I can make it to where my small pie that I can make on my own is bigger than the slice of pie that they give me. And so that's kind of what really pushed me to say, you know what, let's go ahead, let's do this. And now I looked out, this doesn't happen for entrepreneurs, doesn't happen for law firms a lot at all. But I looked out to where I, switched the website on and was like, all right, friends, I'm open for business. And that first Wednesday, so 3 days in, I get a call from a friend and she says, hey, you do real estate law, right? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, well, we just fired our property, or she was the property manager. And she said, we just fired our attorney. I want to have my boss bring you in and see if you can help us. And so I ended up going into that office, met with the boss, met with the team, and that ended up being my first client. And I think I mentioned they were a family-owned real estate company. They had over 1 million square feet of commercial real estate space throughout the country. And so they had lots of just legal issues, just lots of things. And so that was the first client that I had, and they kept the lights on, kept the bills paid, and fed me while I slowly built out the practice from there.
I love it. I love it. So literally you realize, right, the grind, right, in New York back and forth. You're like, man, I need more of this pie, man.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And then you lucked out that first week, right? Literally you turned it on, right? Open for business. Kind of reminds of LinkedIn. Open for business. And you got hit up that first week.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. All right. So let's pivot right into the real estate stuff. Speaking of real estate, right? So of course you assist providing legal advice and services to facilitate transactions and find solutions for real estate matters, right? So let's start from the top. So for raising capital, and I know people have approached you about this. So what's the difference between 506B and C?
Yeah, so our big thing there is I'll first go through and we'll talk about accredited versus sophisticated investors, because that's kind of one of the big differentiators.
Yeah.
So when we're dealing with securities, that basically is meaning that I'm going to pay somebody money. I'm not going to do any of the work, but I'm expecting that I get a return on my property or on my payment. So if I'm doing that, I'm buying a security. And so if you're selling a security, or then the seller has to either register that security or have an exemption. And so when you're talking about 506B and C, you're talking about exemptions from having to register. So when we're talking about registration, and the reason why we have registered companies is because we say, hey, you know what, you're going to give them money. They should be required to give you a certain amount of information so you can determine, do you actually want to give them that money or not? And so with exempt securities, you don't have the public filings and nowhere near as much disclosure as you would with a public company. But the SEC still says, hey, if you're going to take their money, you need to give them a base level of information so they can determine, does this make sense for them? And the SEC generally wants to protect people. Their goal is to protect investors and consumers overall, but even more so people that are going to be more vulnerable. So that's where accredited and sophisticated or unaccredited comes into play. Accredited investors, there's numerous ways, but the two common ways are through income and net worth. And so if we're talking about an individual, an accredited investor is somebody who makes $200,000 or more for the past 2 years and expects to make that much more or more this year. Or they have a net worth that is $1 million or more, excluding their primary residence. So they're high income earners, or they have a high net worth. And so those people, they can afford for an investment or two to not go so well, and they're not going to miss meals. They might not have as nice of a vacation or not get that new car, but they're going to be generally okay. And so with that, a lot of times the SEC will allow a little bit more leeway. And so with 506C raises, you must have 100% all accredited investors. But with that, you can do general solicitation. So you can advertise your deal. You can get random accredited investors that you didn't know. Obviously, we still got to give that disclosure like normal. But you can get their money whether you knew them beforehand or not. Contrast that with 506B. With 506B, we allow you to have an unlimited number of accredited investors, plus up to 35 sophisticated investors. So sophisticated is not quite as clear. So essentially where, I guess the clip notes of it is where it's trying to see, are they financially savvy? Digging a little bit deeper, we're trying to figure out, do they possess the resources and the knowledge to determine, does this deal make sense for them? So we're looking at, what have they invested in the past? What's their educational background? Are they a finance major or maybe a lawyer or something like that? What's their education background? What's their work background? Or maybe do you have a financial planner or a financial advisor that we can send this to them and they can evaluate it for you? So sophisticated, we're trying to see, do they possess the resources to see, does this deal make sense for me or not? So with 506B, like I said, you can have an unlimited number of accredited investors, plus up to 35 sophisticated investors, but you must have a pre-existing substantial relationship with every one of them. So unlike 506C, you can't shout from the rooftops, say, hey, I'm raising money. With 506B, everybody that invests, you have to have known them before the deal was on the table. And you have to have a generally understand, are they accredited, sophisticated, and the reasons why.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. Thank you for that. Yeah, you can't just shout off of the top of the roof, hey, give me money.
Yeah,
absolutely. I said in your presentation, which is how we connected. Shout out to Amy and Sean Nic McGrue and Sean McNicholas. You mentioned during the presentation, I'm shedding some light for my audience here. What is the difference between an exemption and an exclusion? I know you mentioned that during the presentation.
Yeah, so an exemption essentially means that, okay, you fit this rule, but we're just going to not make you follow it. So like 506B is an exemption because the rule says you must register. 506B says, okay, yeah, we know you're supposed to register, but if you follow this stuff, we're not going to make you register. So an exemption is where you fit the requirements, you fit the rule, and you should have to do the stuff. But under certain circumstances, if you do these other things, we're going to say that you've satisfied your requirements. An exclusion means you're just outside of this. So you're not required to follow these rules because we're just either you actually don't fit the rules or we're just going to say you don't fit the rules.
And how does that, I remember that as a follow-up, thank you for that. You mentioned also the promissory note. How does that all tie into the promissory note?
Yeah, so there's sometimes it's called the commercial note exemption. It's more of an exclusion, but essentially, in many cases, a mortgage on a single family home that often is going to be excluded outside of the definition of security. Also, promissory notes with, I believe the timeline is 9 months. Promissory note with a maturity date of 9 months or less. That also typically is going to be excluded outside of the definition of a security as well. Even though if we go through kind of the test to see, is this a security? We might say yes, but if we fit certain, with a promissory note, for instance, they've just said, hey, promissory notes that fit these certain things, we're just going to say not even part of the deal, not even part of securities calculation.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Going back to the accredited, sophisticated, the exemptions. Again, also during that presentation, you mentioned pros and cons. So what do you think are the main pros and cons of both the 506B and the 506C?
Yeah, I won't necessarily...
I don't want to label it that way.
Pros and cons, but I'll walk through like the considerations where
exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, because
especially an attorney, you have to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not even just that; just different positions. To one person, there might be a pro, and that same thing to someone else might be.
Agreed.
So some things you're going to want to be thinking about if you're trying to navigate 506B versus 506C. Part of it is, I'd say, where are you in your real estate investor journey? If you're new, if this is your first deal, the likelihood is that the bulk of your investors are going to be the people in your network, people that know you, that trust you. Because I can tell you now, as an investor, if it's your first, second, or third deal, if I don't know you well, I'm probably not going to invest in that. Not that I have anything against you, but I know that everybody makes mistakes. And I'll say mistakes in quotes. Everybody does things that 10 years later, they're like, man, I was living wild. I don't know why I was doing that. That doesn't make sense. So things that we probably, with more season and more experience, probably would do differently. So me as an investor, unless I know you and trust you and just want to see you succeed, I'm not going to invest in somebody that I don't know if it's their first or second deal, because there's going to be those learning curves, and I don't want to pay for those learning curves as an investor. If I know you, though, part of my investment might be just that I'm investing in you as well, which in that scenario, I'm kind of okay to take a little bit of a haircut, knowing that I'm helping this person that I know is going to do great things. I want to help them out. I also want to make some money, but I'm okay to take a small haircut. So with that, typically your initial investors are going to be the people that are around you in your circle. And so what I tell clients is I say, look at who's around you, and look at who you think is likely to invest. And then figure out what category do they fall into. Do you think are the bulk of them accredited? If so, 506C might make sense because you can get most of the people around you. Plus, you can advertise and maybe get some other people, or maybe they can tell their friends and they can tell their friends who are all accredited. So that might be one way where 506C might make sense. Whereas if you're saying, no, most of the people around me are unaccredited, then I might say, you know what? Well, then let's do a 506B, because if there's any people that are accredited, they can invest. Plus, we can get up to 35 sophisticated investors as well. But then again, that advice kind of changes, or that calculation changes. Is, let's say you're seasoned. At some point when you're very seasoned, unless you're really wanting the people that are around you to invest, you might say, look, I've got 10 deals behind me. Anybody can look me up and they know that I know what I'm doing. They can see that I've hit my numbers on all of my deals. So any real good investor that's savvy and in this game is going to see that I kind of know what's going on. So let me do a 506c and I'll get the accredited investors that I know, but I'll also advertise, because when they say, why should I invest with you? I can say, because those 10 deals that I did in the past, if you had invested in all those, you would have made X amount of dollars. Obviously, you don't want to say you would have made X amount of dollars, but you can say those 10 deals I did in the past, we all hit our numbers. We delivered a return. So while I can't guarantee past results will be future results, we can see my track record. And it's more likely than not that I'll probably be able to mimic some modicum of those results again.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the compare and contrast. Let's say that between the two. So how do you know, I remember from your presentation, if you're violating the rules? If they come knocking on your door,
as I say, the easiest way is to get a call, get a phone call. I'd say the better way to help ensure that you are not violating the rules is you want to make sure you're working with somebody that knows what they're doing and what they're dealing with. This is very nuanced stuff. And kind of as I said before, I don't want to say pros and cons, because for somebody it could be a pro and somebody else that same thing could be a con. Similarly, when we're talking about securities and whatnot, it's very nuanced. And we could say, person A, you can go ahead and do this. And if person B goes and does the same thing, person A is perfectly fine to do it, because person B's situation is slightly different, it puts person B completely out of compliance. So this is something that you really do. You want to have a general understanding so that you can know when there's red flags, when you really need to call somebody. But until you have that general understanding, you just need to make sure you're working with somebody that knows this stuff so that they'll know what red flags are going off, and they'll be able to kind of help you navigate the right way to address that.
We're winding down, almost half an hour. Look, we have time flies, we're having fun. So one of my final questions, I know Amy drives, I had Vina, your friend Vina on my show as well, spoke about the importance of the power team, right? So who do you think are the most important people? Who are the quarterbacks or running backs of the power team? You think it's the attorney, the CPA, is it both? Who do you think should be the number one draft pick?
I'm obviously biased. I'm going to say the attorney. But we do work hand in hand. But here's why I will also say that I am a bit biased, because typically a CPA, now they are very important, but a CPA, assuming you're just paying your taxes, you're not necessarily avoiding jail or avoiding being prevented from doing this. A CPA is going to save you a lot of money. So they are super important for sure. But without having the proper legal compliance, you're going to have lawsuits not only from your potential investors, but also potentially from the SEC as well. So all that's going to do is distract you and take your resources away from doing the work you're trying to do while you're resolving those issues. But that all again is to say, do we pros or cons, or which one is best? I say you need both of us regardless.
You need both on the team. One of my final last questions is for a new person trying to get into the real estate game, especially in the raising private capital game, like what should be their first step? Should be like building the team, should be getting educated, getting a mentor, all the above?
Yeah, I will say getting educated and getting a mentor, but I will give the caveat of get educated and then take action. Don't be in the situation where you're going to be a perpetual student on it. Get educated. And I do think that a mentor is helpful, because a mentor will kind of, speed up that education quite a bit. But then don't get off the sidelines. Quit looking, quit doing the analysis paralysis. At some point, you're educated enough. And as I said before, you're going to make mistakes, things that you're going to learn how to do better. And you're going to have that regardless. Obviously, having a mentor, hopefully that's going to help you avoid a lot of the more base mistakes. But until you're out there, you got to get out there and start doing. We do want to be educated. We don't want to be out here making uninformed decisions. But once we have enough knowledge to make an informed decision, we want to get going, because you're never going to have the perfect deal. You're never going to have the perfect time. It's never going to align perfectly. And if you're waiting for that, then you're going to be waiting and waiting and waiting while deals and money and opportunities for growth are going to be passing you by.
I agree. Yeah, I've been to a couple of conferences already where I've seen people like, hey, yeah, I've been attending this and then that. But you're right. It's like sitting on the sideline. Just gotta do it, right? Just just get in the game, right? Basically. Yep. Where could people find more information about you and your firm?
Yeah, so you can go to the firm website. It's polymathlegal.com. That's POLYMATHLEGAL.com. And also you can find me on social media. It's at Nic the Lawyer. That's NIC the Lawyer. Nick has no K. So at Nic the Lawyer on most of the socials. And yeah, feel free to reach out. We've got blogs up there. I do shoot lots of content on my social media. And we offer free 15-minute consultations to figure out if our services align with what you need. And then if you're needing more specific advice, we also do offer paid strategy sessions and lots of other services as well.
Nic McGrue, everybody. Nick, it's been an honor to have you on my show. I've been wanting to have you on my show for the last couple of weeks. So I'm so glad that you made some time and you're going to be part of season 5. So thank you so much for that.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Nic McGrue, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the episode with Nic McGrue. He's an amazing attorney, and he knows everything about what's being accredited versus non-accredited, etc. So I hope you enjoy the episode, and I hope you transform your way to success. Take care.